Okay, so welcome to connecting your BlackBerry 10 app to the network. I'm Peter Hartmann, I work for RIM. I'm going to talk a little bit about Qt Network and how we can use it on BB10. If you're interested in writing an app, we have our booth downstairs where we give away dev alpha devices. So if you're interested, just go downstairs and say, oh, I got this cool Qt app that I want to port or that I want to create from scratch. And then if you're lucky, we're going to give you some dev alpha devices. It's just that we don't have that many, so we need to somehow restricted, but of course, if you have a cool app that you want to port, just go downstairs and say, okay, I want to create an app. So before we start, a bit about myself. Who am I? I'm a software engineer at RIM. I work on Qt. Previously, I was working for Nokia and for Trolltech, if the older generation still remembers that company. My focus is Qt Network. I've been a maintainer for a while. I'm not anymore because I stepped down from that role. Yes, my main focus is Qt Network, but I also work on core stuff and other stuff. So what's the goal of this presentation? I'm going to show you how you can connect to the network on BlackBerry 10. There are some Qt classes that I want to introduce, like Network Access API and stuff. There are also some other classes that you might need when you write an app. Maybe if you've heard of OAuth or how you use the network from QML. There are several possibilities. And of course, I hope we can show some little example because that's always very descriptive. If you have a question, just raise your hand or just shout it out if you think it's important enough. And then I'm going to repeat it because it's recorded. So if anything is unclear or you're wondering, just raise your hand and then we can answer it, hopefully. So the agenda. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about using the network from C++, which is sort of like the classical way. The second bullet point is using the network from QML. You can also use the network from QML. There are like benefits and disadvantages. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the web services, but only briefly because actually there's another talk about web services. Unfortunately, it's right now. So, well, you had to choose one. But if you write an app for BlackBerry, then I think you're going to touch web services anyhow. So I think I would briefly need to cover it. I'm going to also talk about bearer management, which means like to determine if you're online and what to do if you're not online. And I hope we have enough time in the end to code a little example. Let's start with using a network from C++. So here's the typical university slide that I think you've seen before. At the very bottom, you have the IP layer, which is handled by the operating system. In the case of BB10, that's QNX POSIX style. On top of that, there's TCP and UDP. You see on the right there the socket classes in Qt. I'm going to explain them shortly. Then on top of TCP, there is SSL. We have our own SSL classes inside the Qt Network module. And then at the very top, there's the application level protocols, which is mostly HTTP. You can also use HTTP on top of SSL. You notice that by an HTTPS URL, then it's using SSL. You can also use it on plain TCP. And there are, of course, many more application protocols. But I think HTTP is by far the most important protocol for developing an app because all the services, they use HTTP, like Flickr, Twitter, and all this kind of stuff. And for HTTP, we have our Network Access API. But before we look into that, let's start with the socket classes. Sometimes you want to use the sockets by themselves, like as raw sockets. We have some support for that. Let me show you the diagram. On the right, there's a QTCP server that I just mentioned for completeness. I think you will not really need it. Why would you open a server? I'm not even sure if it works, actually, but I think what you need more is the stuff on the left side, mainly the QTCP socket and the QUDP socket. They both inherit from QAbstract socket, and as the name suggests, the class is abstract. It just contains the code which is common for both TCP and UDP socket classes. So just to mention it, UDP is like you're pumping datagrams into the network. You don't care about whether you're connected or whether the receiver gets all the packets. And with QTCP socket, you open a connection before, and if you lose some packets, then you retransmit it and all that. Yes, another class is the QSSL socket, which is a TCP socket, meaning it offers all the API of QTCP, like connecting to host and sending data, plus all the API that you need for SSL, like starting the handshake and checking for the certificates, checking for the keys, and all this kind of stuff. SSL I'm going to talk about shortly. But for now, just remember there are 3 classes that you can use: QTCP socket, QUDP socket, and QSSL socket. There's more to it on the socket level, but I omit that here. So let's move half a layer up, the SSL classes. There's also a talk tomorrow by Rich, who is in the audience, about SSL. He's going to present all the details about SSL and everything that can go wrong, and there's actually a lot that can go wrong with SSL. So I only present a little overview here. On the left, you see the QSSL socket, already mentioned, and that's actually used internally by the Network Access API. So if you have an HTTPS URL and you are going to retrieve that, then internally we use a QSSL socket. And on the right, you see some other classes for SSL that you need for fine-tuning or for handling errors. The QSSL certificate, there's a configuration, there's keys and ciphers and everything. Again, if you're more interested in SSL, then tomorrow in the morning, I think at 11, something like this. Yeah, there's the SSL talk. What you should remember about SSL is this here. There's a very dangerous method that you can call and that you can do much damage, which is the ignore SSL errors method. That's present both in the QSSL socket and in the QNetwork reply. Please don't use it. It's a bit oversimplified. If you really exactly know what you're doing, you can use it. But if you're not sure that you're doing the right way, then I would recommend not to use it. Do you know why it might be like a bad idea to just blindly ignore all SSL errors if you're doing networking stuff? Yeah, that's one thing. And you open the door for all kinds of man-in-the-middle attacks, like somebody pretending to be Google and sending you a certificate which is not valid or chained to some other route that you don't trust, and all this kind of things. So just remember, be very careful about ignoring SSL errors. Yeah, so that's all I have to say about SSL. Now, back to the stack. Let's move up again. Network Access API, that's how you deal with HTTP and HTTPS URLs. That's, I think, the most common case. Just tell me if you don't agree, but I think if you write an app for a BB10 or for any mobile platform, you're going to use HTTP. So let's look into HTTP. This is the basic diagram how to handle HTTP, QNetwork Request, QNetwork Access Manager, and QNetwork Reply. Let me just ask you, how many of you have used those classes or heard of the classes a bit? Many, around half, okay. So the QNetwork request resembles an HTTP request that you send to the server. You feed it into the manager. The manager sends it on the wire and gives you back a QNetwork reply, which resembles an HTTP reply. So let's just look into the request first. That's a bit what a request contains. It contains a verb that you see here on the left, get. There's also other verbs like post and put. There's a URL. In that case, like it's mentioned relatively, get index.html protocol. There's some headers. You see the host header here, there are more. Then there's a blank line. And in case you're using post and put, which means in case you're uploading data, then you also have payload data. So when do you upload data? Imagine you're writing a BB10 app and you take a picture and you upload that to Facebook. Then you don't use a get request, you use a post and put request. So that request, actually the most important thing is the URL that you're gonna use it. You can use a request just from a URL. That request you feed into the manager, which sends the request, which actually sounds quite simple, but it's a lot of stuff to do. It needs to check the cookies it needs to send and the cache. It needs to determine the proxies if there are any. Also for HTTPS, it does the checking of the certificates to check everything's correct here. And then it connects to the host and sends the data. And what you get back is the QNetwork reply. Here you see a simplified example of a reply. Again, it contains headers, and then a blank line, and then some body. In this case, we got an 200 OK, some headers, date, the content type of the body, and then at the bottom you see some HTML code. I'm going to talk about some other like content types later, what you might have to expect there. But just remember the QNetwork reply contains the headers, accessors for the headers and accessors for the body. And for the QNetwork reply, the body is just opaque. It's just a stream of bytes. You have to handle all the content types yourself in your app. Yes, so that was the using the network from C++. I hope you can see how those classes are used in the example. It's just a lot more descriptive. Now, you can also use the network from QML. if you want, and there's actually a class called XML HTTP request. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It's nothing QML specific. It's just a JavaScript class. And please don't let the name misguide you. It's nothing to do specifically about XML. It's just you can make an HTTP request. And also, if you used the request before, for instance, in a browser, it's restricted a lot with all the like cross-origin requests and stuff. But in QML, you can just make any request that you want. So the benefit of this class, or QML maybe in general, is that you need less code, but you also don't have the fine-grained access to all the error codes and parsing and handling the headers first and all this kind of stuff. But it works, and I'm going to show you an example how I use that as well. I'm just going to show you a little stub code, how you typically use that. That's now JavaScript that you could use in your QML file directly. You create a request, and in the bottom you see you send it, with a get to the URL. And in the middle, you see, once the request is done, there's a variable where you can handle the code, called request.responseText. So yes, you can use the network from QML with less code and maybe a little less control. So that's it about QML. Now, web services. What is a web service? I mean, basically anything that you access on the web is a service, but often it's used like to say something is not used in a browser context. With rendering, you just pull data, like you pull tweets from Twitter or pictures from Instagram or whatnot. So again, back to our initial diagram. We have the request, the manager, and the reply. Now, what can you use in a request typically when you use web services? I said already that sometimes you want to upload stuff. If you use HTTP post or put, you have some payload data. So there are different ways how to upload stuff. For small data, you want to probably use a QByte array because that's easiest. If you have lots of data or like a file, you just use a QFile. That's actually a common mistake or like something that could be done better in many apps, that they just read everything they want to upload into a byte array, then everything's in memory. So if you take a picture which is 2 megabytes big, there's no need to read it into memory in a QByte array. You can just use the QFile and then it will read it in chunks. So if you have lots of data, then I would just use a QFile. Then there's also the possibility to upload multiple parts with the class QHTTP multipart. So what are multiple parts? Some APIs, for instance Flickr, they require the message to contain different parts. Imagine you upload an image, then you have the binary data in one part, you have the title in another part, and you have description in yet another part. And they are separated by MIME boundaries, which the class does for you, and also does efficient memory management without copying the stuff around additionally. So you'll encounter that multipart stuff in several APIs. So for that, you can use the QHTTP multipart. Now, also interesting is parsing the data from the reply. Here in the example, you see it's HTML, but often from a web service, you get back other formats, like a binary format. Again, if you want to display an image, you get the binary format back. Also useful is this JSON data. Who of you knows JSON? Most or more than half. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And I'm going to show you later how Instagram does that. It's data format which is easy to parse from JavaScript context, meaning browser, or in our case from QML. It's very simple to parse. There's this method called JSON.parse. There's also a method called eval. Please don't use it because it's more dangerous. It parses JavaScript code. You maybe have an idea why eval is dangerous compared to JSON.parse. It's evil. Yeah, that's true. You know why, or you have an idea why? Yeah, exactly. That's the point. I mean, JSON.parse just passes JSON data, but eval executes any kind of JavaScript. So if you have some evil server that sends you data, or somebody managed to hook into your call, then he can send you random JavaScript, which you then will just happily execute, which is usually not what you want. And apart from that, JSON.parse is also faster. You can also use JSON from C++. There are third-party libs, like a JSON parser. and also QJSON style. I think in Qt5 we have our own parser. I'm not sure about that. We have? Okay. But usually, since in QML it's so easy to parse, often I guess you want to do it in QML. But you can do it in C++ as well. Then you can also parse the data the old-fashioned way if you want, XML. Again, you can use that also from QML as well as from C++. In QML, there's a nice class called XML list model, which is very easy to use. A few lines of code, it's using XPath, so you can extract all the pieces from an XML document that you want. If you get a lot of XML, then you probably want to do that in C++. We have a fast XML stream reader. We also have old DOM and SAX classes, but the stream reader is requires some glue code, so it's very fast, but it's more work if you want to use that. But I think most of the web servers, they tend to send more and more JSON because it's just easier to use. Yeah, so that's about the data formats. I think it's one of the three. It's either some binary format, or you get some JSON back, or some XML back. Now, another thing about web services. No, important, I forgot. Just to stress, to make a point. Please don't use eval, it's dangerous. Just use json.parse. Okay, now, another thing about web services is OAuth. Have you heard of OAuth? Roughly what it is? A bit. So I think if you downloaded an app from your smartphone, I think you might have seen the thing that the first time you use it, you need to log in to the service like Facebook and then grant the app access to something. So you don't supply your username and password to the app. You just delegate some rights, like reading your images or whatever. And that's what OAuth actually does. So you log into Facebook itself, only give the username and password to Facebook, and then you grant the app access to some rights. So the app doesn't have your password. And for BlackBerry 10, there's a library for that, for using that flow. It's on GitHub at that URL. It's based on KQOAuth, which is like a library or like code on top of Qt. And it has been ported or tested on BB10. So feel free to check it out. Yes. Now, bearer management. What is bearer management? Again, back to the initial diagram. You have the request, the manager, and reply. But usually before you send the request, you want to check whether you're actually online. And you can do that either with the top class that you see. There's the QNetwork configuration manager. You can ask it whether you're online or not. And if not, then you want to display something like, yeah, we're not online, cannot send, please go online, something like this. Or alternatively, you can also send your request anyhow and check the reply. If you're not online, then you will get an error in the reply. So either check before you send it or just send it anyhow and then display an error if there is one. But in any case, you probably want to catch that error. If you're not online, then you need to somehow display that to the user, please go online. Now, if you're not using the network access API, but the socket classes, those ones, then you need to, well, do it yourself. Meaning, check the QNetwork configuration manager or just send the request and then handle the error, something like this. Just so whoever writes an app with the network should handle that case well, where you're not online. Just one more thing about the bearer code. Currently, the priorities are if you're connected to both Wi-Fi and cellular, then Wi-Fi is used. And if you're not connected to the Wi-Fi, then use cellular. Because I think that's the standard behavior. If you're connected to a Wi-Fi, then it's faster and you want to use it. And if not, then you just use the cellular connection. Yes. So, example app. Any questions so far about using the network or how you use? Yes? Yes, I mean, if you're You mean if you connect it to a hotspot and not logged in the sense of you don't know the WPA key, or if you're or you connect? You mean the captive portal stuff? Oh yeah, yeah, that's actually quite tricky. So it might be that you're connected and it would show as connected right now, but you cannot. That's the thing where you have to enter your, I don't know, your hotel room number or whatever, your credentials into the browser first, and then you can use it. So yeah, that's actually bad because it's you cannot determine that whether you really can use the internet or not. So in that case, it would show as connected, but you would need to open the browser first and then enter that. So we're actually working on that you can choose the connection so that you can say, I want to use cellular anyhow. But from what I know, there's no simple solution to the captive portal problem. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it would be a bit overkill to do it always, I guess. Like, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if you want to do that in Qt in general. You're.
Oh, so like on a BlackBerry device, on BB10, there's a little BlackBerry logo that shows up that you can access BlackBerry services, which basically means that you can connect to the BlackBerry NOC, Network Operations Center. And so I would guess there might be an API, not for Qt, but maybe a BlackBerry specific API that could give you that information.
Yeah. But right now, I guess you would need to handle that yourself in the application code. It's not in Qt itself. Yeah. Any more questions? Okay, then let's try to code a bit. Gonna switch to Momentics. So that's the Momentics API. As if you've seen the talk by Vladimir before, you can also use Creator. I'm using Momentics here. So what we need to do, or what we want to do, is to get images from Instagram. Instagram has a nice API, like a location-based API, where we can ask for images from this and that area. Here I have some QML code, and we want to get images from Berlin. Here, if you see in the URL, that's some Instagram API stuff. I have some latitude and longitude hard-coded. That's just the coordinates of Berlin. And I can tell Instagram, oh, please give me all those images from Berlin, or the latest images from Berlin. Here, if I scroll a bit, you also see the access token. That's actually OAuth access token that I just hard-coded before. So if you write an app, you will have to include the whole OAuth flow, let the user log in through a web view and then grant access. I just hard-coded it here so that it's faster. So how it works is that we send a request to the Instagram API. We get back a response, which is in JSON. We parse that JSON for the images URLs, and then we gonna display the images in some Cascades app. So just for demoing purposes, I have parts of it written in QML and parts in C++. I guess if you write an app, then you want to have either everything QML or more likely everything in C++ because you have better access to the stuff. So the first part I'm going to do in QML. That's actually the template that I showed you before. We create an XML HTTP request. We send it, and once it's done, we can parse the request.response text stuff. So how do we parse it? Well, it sends back JSON, so we can have a variable parses the JSON. Now, how does this JSON look like that Instagram sends us? Can show you. I mean, don't worry, it's a lot of code, but you see there's a data element here, and here you see it's some array, and inside the array, one of the elements, it contains an images and standard resolution and a URL. That's actually the URL that we want to get and that we want to display. So let's try to parse that. Can just access it like this, the data. Then if you remember, the data element was an array, so we need to go through that array. So we access the elements. Oh, I need to check again. How was it called? Inside the array, images, standard resolution URL. No. Okay. So we have our URL in our JavaScript variable. And what you need to do then is we need to get that URL. That I'm going to just do in C++. I'm just going to leave a to-do here. Yeah, request URL. Now let's switch to our C++ code. Here in our header file, I got a simple class that's actually created for me. If I do in Momentix file new BlackBerry Cascade C++ app, it creates all that stub code for me. Now, what I need to do, I'm gonna instantiate a QNetwork Access Manager. I'm gonna declare it. Just public, yeah, whatever. And I want to have some slots, one to load the image and one once it's finished. Just use a qbyte array. No. Okay. Now let's switch to the implementation of the class. Again, a lot of stub code, and I changed a bit to display the images later on. Don't worry about that, it's like basic cascades usage. All I want to do here is to instantiate the manager. So we have our QNetwork Access Manager. And we want to connect the signal once it's done. To a slot in our class. That's actually the slot I just declared in the header file, if you remember. Is there one bracket missing? Oh yeah, right. Thanks. Okay. So in the constructor, I instantiate my manager and connect the signal. Now, two more things to do. Implement the method to load the image. Call it image. So how does it work with the QNetwork Access API? Remember, from you create the request from the URL, and from that URL, you feed into the manager. So let's create a URL from the byte array that we get from QML. From the URL, we create our request. And then we call get on the manager. And that's it. So the manager sends the request. And once it's done, reply finished is called, because we connected a slot before here. So in the reply, we just parse the content. So yeah, remember I said the content is just opaque to QNetwork reply. We just parse it into a byte array, and then we create the cascades image, and this code just displays it on the screen. So there's one more thing left to do. Remember, we had this placeholder in QML. And actually what I did in QML, I declared the class, this class here, so I could use it from QML. So we have this my class variable that I can use in QML. So that's what I'm going to call here. Ah, I forgot. How was it called? Load image. So that's it. We call the initial Instagram API with the JSON from QML. It sends it back, JSON, we parse the JSON, and then we call into our C++ code with the URL. And in C++, we get the URL and then we display it on the screen. So let's see if everything's fine or I did a mistake. Let's see. Seems to work. Error message, but it still displays it. Anyhow, I'm going to switch the projector now. Let's hope that works. 25 minutes left. Oh, that's a lot. I hope you have a lot of questions. So here, that's the basic thing. That's what people post on Instagram. Yeah, that's a nice picture. But you see, well, here maybe that's Berlin. Turm. If I scroll down, a lot of people. That's the Brandenburg Gate, Brandenburger Tor. Is that the dome? Who is local? Oh. It's again Alex. So yeah, you see, it works. It's just, I mean, random images from Berlin, but you can also query the popular ones or the recent ones. They have really nice API, so you can quickly get up to speed, and then where you can go from here, you can show the descriptions or show the people that posted it or whatever. Yes. Any questions before I switch back to the slides? Nope. Was it? Here in the C++ file to set the context property here. That's all that is required. And then QML can use it. Yeah, so that was the little example app. A few more slides before we're done. Oh. Yeah, actually that was it. So agenda, I hope you saw a little bit how to use the network from C++, meaning mostly network access API, network access manager, request and reply. You can also use the network from QML via XML HTTP request, but if you want to code a robust app, I would suggest to use the C++ API because it's more powerful. For demoing stuff or quickly getting something done, you can also use the QML XML HTTP request. Then you're probably gonna get in touch with web services if you code an app, like the whole OAuth authorization flow, and also parsing JSON and XML, and also uploading data. A few things about barrier management. There's this, you have to check whether you're online or not. And also we had this thing about Wi-Fi and cellular. And then there was a little example app. So yeah, that's again the slide from the beginning. I hope some of the questions at least were answered. The Qt classes involved. It's like basically the Qt network module, and also for parsing data, some other classes from some other modules. There's classes involved on top of it, like the OAuth stuff, which is not in Qt, but in some other repo. So you might want to pull that in as well. That was the example. So please give feedback. Just tell me if that was what you expected, or if you wanted more on the socket stuff or on some other things. Just write me a mail or send me a tweet. And then that's it.